the virtual cafe. My guest today is Leslie Saul, and Leslie and I have known each other for many, many years through some women's business development community. There's the Commonwealth Institute we first met. I am very lucky that she actually picked the colors in my apartment. And so when I moved into this home 10 years ago, which sort of shocks me, I said, Leslie, I'm going to kind of figure out how to make this my own. So she was gracious enough to come in, and we worked together, and she asked great questions. And so as people are now dealing with home offices, on a snap, everybody had to make their corner. This is my little corner world into a home office. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how, to design a home office. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what companies are thinking about right now. We're going to certainly have some time for all of you to ask some questions. If you are in a noisy spot, please be kind and thoughtful and put yourself on mute. And if you want to only see Leslie, you can go up to the little box at the top and you can click speaker view instead of the gallery view. And so you will only see her as the active speaker. So if you're trying to learn a little bit about Zoom, that might be something that will help you. And then when this recording is done, we will go ahead and share that with all of you. So Leslie, what happened when all of this happened? Did you get phone calls, and what are you seeing that people are finding they like and don't like? And I'm actually finding people who are not necessarily in your space saying to me, oh my gosh, we've got to rethink our house. If we have to have home offices and kids at home, we've got to rethink our space. What are you seeing? What can you share?
A lot of, the first thing that happened was the phone stopped ringing. Because every project either went on hold or was canceled. But then we started getting, and as a friend of mine said, it was lucky we do work for private homes as well as corporate and institutional work. But the phone did start ringing, and mostly about my back hurts, my leg hurt. I need to find a comfortable chair. Like, just get me a chair. Can I have my chair from the office? I want one at home. And I think that's where the first calls were coming in on how to make it more ergonomic, how to make it more comfortable. I really missed my office. These are the corporate clients took me home years ago. I never did work in private homes, but they loved what happened at their office and they brought me home. And then it really became two different specialties. But and now I see that again, where people at home are saying, I want my office set up. But on top of having home offices being requested, what we're working on, in fact, this morning, is a friend who, and long-term client who wants an indoor pool because all the pools are closed. And people of certain means, what they're missing, they might have a home gym already. They might have a putting green indoors, but they don't have a swimming pool that they can swim in the cold. And so I found that interesting, and I think is COVID driven. We've also asked for the typical kitchens and baths, and I attribute that to COVID because some of these are only 10 years old. They just now are actually being in them, using them more, and they realize they maybe don't function. And then the last thing people have asked for is just new lighting, and I think that's Zoom driven. I think people are seeing that it's hard to find a place where you can see yourself and see the background.
I'm going to unmute myself. I'm muting myself because I live near I live near North Station, and anybody who knew, all of a sudden the motorcycles are going by. So what happens is the anti-closed down group drives by every so often with loud noising and honking, and is open up the economy. And so I will be back and forth with mute issues. No, it's interesting what you're saying that. So I actually, at one point, I'll grab it. I have a ring light that actually creates more light for me as I am sitting in my new corner office here in the corner of my little apartment. What are you finding that you're seeing people who are needing to be mobile? I mean, some people are saying to me, when my kids are in class, they have the dining room table. Now, all of a sudden, I'm needing to be in a corner. And so how can people kind of think about this mobile design, if you will?
That's really interesting. And I also think the whole, if we can also pair that with sit stand, people at the office, have desks that they can sit down in their ergonomic chair, which, by the way, if you have an ergonomic chair, sit all the way back in your chair. Let the chair do its work so that your back can relax into it and you have a lot more energy. And we can go into ergonomics later, but I think that the idea of the sit stand is when you're sitting and sitting properly, even in a great chair, you shouldn't be sitting all day. So you want to stand up. And I discovered that kitchen counter height is actually a pretty good standing height for me at 36 inches high. So I can just move some papers over to my kitchen. I don't have a stand-up desk, you know, one that goes up and down, but I don't really need to if I can just go into the kitchen and work. What I've noticed in a lot of my daughter-in-law, for instance, if she's on the call, hi Jennifer,
Hi.
but she's on. But you know, you could have, I noticed that she has a desk set up in her bedroom so that she can get away from the kids. And I think that a lot of people who wouldn't even want to have a desk in the bedroom because they want to separate work from life, from sleeping, they're now reconsidering that idea, because at least, you know, I think most kids know parents' bedroom off limit, you know, has rules, and maybe not all families, but I think that is a place that some people can get away. So I think it's really important to understand, and a designer can help you. I think a lot of people feel helpless. One of our clients actually just sent a bunch of stuff to Suma, who might also be on the call right now, to say, these are the things I found on Amazon that look good, but can you tell me if these are going to fall apart in 5 minutes? And had Suma analyze whether her concepts were good, and Suma sent her an alternative for one thing and told her one of the things that she liked was actually a fine company and she could buy that. And so I think even if we're not doing a full redesign, we have this experience about work, efficient, ergonomic workspace that looks good. That's kind of what we do. So we can help you with little stuff too.
So I was on the call. I'm a consultant for a company that does industrial or commercial cleaning. They're actually going to be going back to work soon as this is changing at 25%. And so they're having to, you know, work within a company's guidelines. And then they're also at the same time redoing their own offices, which obviously got shut, all that construction got shut down, you know, when that was taking place in the beginning. They're not having to do a lot of redesign because they hadn't necessarily embraced this whole open space concept. How is that going to be changing as offices are going to call you and companies are going to call you? You know, are you going to have face shields? I mean, you know, how is the new office going to be looking? And some of this may be temporary, but I also think it just makes the whole idea of how can you, you know, move and adapt as we need to be from, you know, big companies, little companies, and what are some thoughts around that?
Well, and I've heard it described that there's sort of 3 phases. The first phase is now everybody's shut down. We know that there is still a live virus with no treatment, successful treatment, and no successful vaccine yet, no approved vaccine yet. So phase 1 means, yes, we're going to be wearing face masks in the office. We are going to continue to work from home. It is absolutely, you are protected in case your employer is pushing you to come to work and you don't want to. It is a protected class to stay home because you're afraid of the virus. Legitimately, you might be afraid for your own personal safety, or just because you're worried about being the cause of something for other reasons. So you can stay home. And I think that really leads to phase 2, which is we have a treatment, people feel more comfortable about going back to work. More people go back to work. I think the rule in Massachusetts, only 25% anyway of your staff to begin with. So I think that's kind of phase 1. But phase 2 means people will be going back. But I think what will not change is that people will need a comfortable home office. I don't think that's changing. I think it's foolish to think that everyone's going to work from home. It's not going to happen. It might work for certain roles. It might work for certain people, but people will be going back to work. They may not be wanting to go back 5 days a week. The commute was a killer for many people. They may choose to go in 2 days a week and work from home 3 days a week. We have someone who's been working for us for 20 years remotely. since 2010. Since 2000. We moved into Cambridge in July of 2000, and I kept thinking, how am I going to keep Monique? She's coming all the way from the South Shore. She's not going to want to come to Cambridge. And we came up with this idea of setting her up at home, paying for good internet, a good computer, and having her set up at home so she could work from home and be in the office, because she's so awesome. We need her. We need that steam coming out of her ears, inspiring everyone else in the office. So I think that may be the future, where people need comfortable workspace both at home and at work. I don't buy.
She's with us today on Zoom.
Is she? Great. Hi, Monique. And I think that what won't change is the need to collaborate. And so that means that two things have to happen. We're going to, in the short run, yes, we're going to sit checkerboards. We're going to have a single circulation path. We're not getting rid of people sitting in close proximity together for the long term. But we also, by having at home spaces and at work spaces, spaces that people can work in more separated fashion, will be prepared for phase 2 or 3 or whatever's going to be happening. And so there will be technology that will make it easier for people to team remotely. There are global teams that are now collaborating remotely, that they've been doing it for years. So this isn't, the technology exists. The companies are going to have to invest in some of the technologies that will help this happen. But I think when you look at it from a home perspective, there are people working from home and they have another job out of the home. And there are people who have small businesses who only work from home. And it turns out that I don't think the needs are that different. I think now everyone's realizing, even if you're only working from home 2 or 3 days a week, it's got to be comfortable. It's got to have good lighting. It's got to have what you need. And companies are going to have to pay for that. I don't think the real estate needs at work are going to go away, though. I think, this idea that there's not going to be any people working out of offices is crazy. It's not going to be that way.
I saw the CEO of Wayfair speak last week via Zoom, and he fully admitted that they were not a work from home company. That was not their mindset at all. And he fully admitted that this has been a game changer. And it was pretty interesting. And what I can do once that recording for that talk is available, I'm happy to share it. But it was interesting to hear him kind of do a little bit of a, my words, not his, of a little bit of a humble pie, saying, we used to think everybody needed to come in. There are still some needs for that, but it was interesting seeing him say, and also because some people could be in call centers, but they didn't need to be actually in an office call center. They could be, working remotely. I think, maybe it was JetBlue or Delta Airlines or Southwest, maybe was probably, I think, one of the first places that did it. And I would have fun every time I called Southwest. I'm like, where are you? Are you in your kid's bedroom? Are you in, and are you in Kansas? Are you in, Oklahoma? You were always talking to somebody. And a lot of the call centers, interestingly enough, and Leslie and I share both being ex-Midwesterners, a lot of call centers are Midwest, because you have that friendly, easygoing, accent neutral,
Exactly.
population. Leslie, Larry has asked a question here, and anybody else is welcome to post questions in the chat, or if you want to say it out loud. Larry, I don't know if you want me to ask your question, but he says, I have a functional, comfortable office, but it has too much light even with the windows covered. I have to take my laptop into the darkest bedroom for Zoom calls. What would be your suggestions for Larry, and anybody else? Please share your questions.
Well, clearly you could do better window treatment. Is it a south-facing window? Southwest probably is the worst. You can get complete light blockout, so you don't have to leave your office. You also could look at your screen settings, because it's possible that if you brighten or darken your screen, it will help you see in the brighter light, the brighter screen, and maybe that is something that you haven't been able to do. And I think that if you supplement, you were saying, what was his issue with was too much glare on his laptop, or he just couldn't see
Too much backlight, really.
Too much backlight.
Yeah, and then which causes me to be blacked out when in a Zoom call.
And
So
have you tried turning it around so that your desk is under the window?
and the background isn't appropriate, I guess, at that point. So
Yeah, so then we'll have to go to virtual backgrounds if you're worried about Zoom.
mm-hmm.
Because the natural light will always be more flattering. This light actually looks good. You're getting that side light, so you're sideways to the light. Or are you in a dark bedroom right now?
It's the darkest. The house is very open concept and well lit, so the shades are drawn in the two windows in the room, so it becomes the darkest room.
And this is a gadget, Larry, you may want to look at. It's a ring light. It actually has a holster here for a phone, so you can actually broadcast from your phone on that. So it's not a huge difference, but it's somewhat of a difference.
It infills.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It fills.
Yeah, I do have a light, not a ring light. It does help. I think my phone camera might be better than mine. It is certainly newer than my laptop and my desktop. So I will try that.
And the other thing is that the window treatments sometimes are not measured properly. And so you get a lot of light leakage on the side, even when you pull them down. And so if I'll just turn this for just a second, but you can see that there's a drapery that falls down right next to that blind. And so you can cover that gap with some colorful or not colorful, if you're not a colorful person. You can cover that with a curtain that often that'll help, just that one little bit that will make the difference between too glary and just right.
Mm-hmm. Another thing you may want to look at, Larry, is when I was in Alaska, the window treatments were completely different because it's in the summertime, it's daylight all the time. So you may want to actually move and see if there's something different. Just Google Alaska. I don't know. There might be Alaska window treatments that are different. I don't know.
We may have to do that for you just to find out if Alaska does anything different. They certainly have short days and long days.
So Leslie, one of the big questions that's coming in now is, are we ever going to go out to eat again? And
I feel like that's the most uncomfortable of all of the activities. You know, the client who can't go to the pool. I think the pools will reopen, even if they did every other lane or something like that. In the short run, there still will be pools open. And I know restaurants will be open, but I think more people will feel uncomfortable. Even Sweden, which has had it completely open the whole time and definitely has more deaths than neighboring countries with larger populations, excuse me. What Sweden has found is that people aren't going out anymore because they're afraid. And so they realize, so I think restaurants are the last to recover. But what the economist from Harvard whose child is at RISD, and so he was part of the RISD connection talks that they're doing. He said that restaurants actually will be a bounce back industry. So they'll be closed longer, but then they will bounce back. If they can survive, they'll bounce back. And of course, takeout, I think, is helping them at least survive in the short run. Hopefully that can hold them going for a while. But
and so I know you're a Red Sox fan. What's going to happen when when it comes time for sporting arenas? I mean, if you were going to be designing the suites, or how all of that is going to look different for those types of populations that are really dense, what can we look for in those situations as those get into a redesign?
I think that in the end, when you go to see the Celtics or Fenway, you're going because you want to be part of that crowd. I just love being hoarse at the end of the night from shouting at terrible pitchers or at missed dunks. So I think that, or even just great dunks, yay, and I love that. So I think that design is not changing. Whether people I don't think they're going to feel comfortable wearing a mask and screaming. So I think that might be step one, is to wear masks, but I think it's just not going to happen until there's a vaccine and until most people are vaccinated.
So let's talk about how you start a project. I call you up and I say, Leslie, I've been housebound. I am in small space. What would be a couple of things that you would suggest I do, you know, short term, long term, as I think about, I fully believe that for the rest of my life, I'm going to want to have a better home office setup. Even if I get a job that had a corner office, I am going to want to have something that is, I mean, it's, my place is small. You've been a guest in my home. It's on the smaller side of things. I certainly could be more efficient. We can talk about that separately with, you know, but how would you start that project? What were some questions that you would ask me? I remember the questions you asked me when we were talking about colors, but let's say I win the lottery and I'm like, Leslie, gut my apartment. What would you do first?
Well, the first thing that you have to realize when you come to a design firm is that a custom design is like a bespoke suit. So you maybe you start with picking out pretty fabrics, but generally what will happen is we'll look at you. If I'm designing a suit for you, then are you a person who has wide shoulders and narrow hips, or narrow shoulders and wide hips? Because we're going to design a suit, if it's bespoke for you, if it's designed just for you, it has to fit. And so I think it's really important to kind of groove on who you are inside, not maybe where you are today to start with. To start with, think about who you are. And that's why when some of you may have seen this on the little mailing that that Diane sent out, but you know, this was the home. Can you see this? This was the home office for the person who just wanted light and bright and everything white. And it's a small space. I want everything white. And like, and maybe we didn't really consider too much glare, but that's another thing you could do is paint everything dark on your wall that has too much light. But anyway, the white, light, and bright. Are you that kind of person, or style, or are you more of an industrial? Modern, black, and tech? You like things you can see all the parts and pieces that go together. These are the same components, just done in different ways. Or this one is kind of, we called it playful, petite and playful, because the chair's on the smaller side, and this looks like it's actually a pretty big space. But the idea is to understand.
I was going to say that's my living room right there. You're looking at.
Yeah, and this. Oh, I know, it's pretty funny. So we want to understand kind of what you like and what you dislike. And one of the things we do start with is, what do you like about your current space? Because I want to keep the things you like, and then what are the things you dislike? And that can be functional things or it can be aesthetic things. But all that information, you've got to start from where you are and who you are. There are aspirational things too. Well, I want to look like I won the lottery, even if I didn't. Or I know I have a lot of money, but I want to keep it modest. We did a custom tile for a client in Cambridge who had a lot of money and who basically wanted it to look standard, but he didn't like the exact standard sizes. So he was willing to spend money to be slightly different, exactly what he wanted, at a premium, to look like he didn't spend a premium. So don't assume that people always want the most bang for their buck. They don't necessarily. And what's important about custom design is we can do that. We can help you translate a feeling into a space.
That's great. Catherine Dander is a personal trainer, and she has been, going from a space where she's got lots of space and can move around and do the exercise, and now she's, literally having people on her floor because she's trying to. What would be some recommendations for someone who is in that kind of a situation and needing to, do you want to say anything more, Catherine? Thank you for unmuting.
I've got a fairly, I live in Hawthorne, and so we have these enclosed porches. So that's what I'm using pretty much. But I have to go from a standing position to a kneeling position to a laying down position with the same client on Zoom. So it's a continuous up and down with I'm like, there's got to be a better way, but I don't know what it is.
All right. So first of all, on the technical solution, we have, Monique, right, feel free to contact us, which we are happy to talk to you about it. But I think that you might have a technological solution, which is an independent camera, because you could mount a camera up high that can see you when you're both. You could put it on a tripod. You could put your camera on a tripod that's got a big enough distance
The
that
phone
it'll
on the
take you
tripod?
all through. I take a Zumba class right now
Uh-huh.
with my Zumba instructor is a sales rep in the wall covering industry, and she just is amazing and amazingly fit. And she's out on her deck, and she sets the camera up high and kind of up against the wall, looking down at her. And it seems to catch her because we do squats, we do
Okay. Oh, that's a
jumping
great
up and
idea.
down,
So
dancing
just like
forward,
a phone
backward.
camera?
I can ask her.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So you'll have to ask Diane for your contact or whatever, so
Okay.
I can reach out to her and ask her what she's doing, because it definitely works for Zoom.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Um,
It's like,
but
oh,
I
hang around.
also want to answer something in a generic way for everyone, which is that I think that I don't know if anyone else has been watching this, but Apple Plus has is a new streaming service. Well, not that new, but I think you can still get a 30-day trial if you want. And there's a series called Home, Home. And it's amazingly well produced. The first one was a guy in Sweden who built a greenhouse around his house so he could have a temperate climate in the winter and grow food year round. He's completely independent. All the water recirculates. It's really amazing engineering, and he's an engineer. The second project's about this artist in Chicago that's transformed part of south side of Chicago slum area. He's amazingly creative and strong, and his success as an artist enabled him to get the funding to do this. He's gotten a lot of grant money too. The third one was this woman in Bali who's transforming the bamboo industry, which is in 5 years you can grow a house. Think about that. You can grow the house. All the materials, everything's made out of bamboo. And in these large spaces, it's not relevant to Emerson and Hawthorne, but the fourth one is in Japan, and that one is an actual architect who had 330 square feet in his apartment, and his parents bought the apartment, I think in the 80s or 70s or 80s, and for something like $30,000, and had 7 people living in this apartment, in a 300 square foot apartment. There were 3 bedrooms. The parents lived in one, the 2 sisters in one. They rented out the 3rd bedroom for income. And then he had to sleep in the living room and take his bed apart and, his bedding off the bed every day, folded up. So when he took over this apartment, he had this inspiration of taking, multi-purposing everything. He emptied out the space, and he has walls that move to create rooms in the same space. Is basically, he calls it the infinite room, because it can be so many things. And so I think, getting back to Diane's earlier question about what if I need to be mobile, I have to move around, and you think about that example of, well, maybe a flip up table that can roll out of the way for people who need it out of the way when they want to play on the floor with kids or do Zoom. There might be a bigger room that we start putting things on wheels or making them transformable, so that he has chairs that tuck into kitchen counters, under kitchen counters, that come out and are his chairs when he wants to sit and watch a movie. He takes his window treatment in the windows, and it becomes a movie screen, and he has a projector in the ceiling. So thinking creatively about this tiny space, it's amazing. And the 5th one is about a house in Maine that the guy charred the wood. It's another, so it's really quite a series, and not really what I was here to promote, but I think the important thing is that there are many solutions and sort of thinking about what you want to accomplish. What is it? Is it that you really want to have friends feel comfortable when they walk into your house? We worked on a very big mansion in Brookline, and that was her overriding concern. Is she loves to entertain, but she wants people to come in and just feel comfortable. And what we discovered, and one of the reasons that I think that house in particular is so comfortable, is because there is stuff. It's not the minimalist thing of this Japanese guy who obviously lives by himself, because how could 2 people live in this, pristine, perfect place? But the idea of stuff around you, opposite of Marie Kondo. And not only does it matter whether it gives you joy, but it's part of creating that environment that is what you want to have in your life. Do you want your friends to come over and feel comfortable? Do you want the people who take your exercise class to be able to see what you're doing properly? You know, like think about what are the needs, and then we can solve for that problem.
You know, it's interesting. I remember saying to somebody, every time I move, one of the hardest decisions I have is what books do I give up? And I was telling this to somebody, and she was like, well, why would you keep your books? I'm like, it's like, I was just, and when I was over at her apartment one time, she had a beautiful glass thing on shelves on the wall. And it had, you know, vases and, you know, some artistic things, but absolutely no books.
It's amazing.
It was amazing.
The Japanese guy did have books and CDs, very well organized, as does the Chicago ones. That's really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that has to do with you.
Yeah, it was so foreign to me to think about not having books at all. And, you know, but that was something different. So Leslie, this has been wonderful. What are some closing thoughts you can think of to share with us as we go into, you know, COVID 2.0? We begin to, you know, I personally think that many people are going to be working from home this summer, you know.
Definitely. I think they're working from home part-time permanently, unless they really have to be in the office all the time. I think more people will be working part-time, at least remotely.
So if I was going to say, okay, this is now not a temporary thing, what would be 3-5 things you would say, Diane, do this 1, 2, 3 to get yourself set up for the summer, other than win the lottery and hire you?
There you go. I do think it's, for instance, your living room, if you turned your sofa to make the back away from the window, assuming I'm going to not need natural light when I sit in my sofa, I'm going to have it coming from behind me. But as an example, that turn of the sofa from against the wall perpendicular to the window to the wall that's to a parallel to the window facing away from the window, that space behind the sofa suddenly is a room. So when we look at the landscape, we talk about rooms. When we look at inside one room, there might be 2 or 3 rooms that are just different spaces that are different functionally. You know, the idea of multi-purpose. Now, sometimes multi-purpose just doesn't work, and you just have, you know, so I'm not claiming to be able to put 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag, but I do think that, you know, maybe it's cool to have some white sugar, some brown sugar, some black sugar, some, you know, like having it a little bit mixed up. And sometimes I move the sofa here, you know, like the idea of your initial idea about mobility. I think it's an interesting question. And rearranging your furniture and rearranging your art does make it feel like you have a fresh place. And I think these are things you can do yourself. I think you can declutter the areas you want to declutter and keep some clutter, maybe. I didn't mean you personally, everyone, including, especially me. You don't want to look at my table right now. But the decluttering areas will also give you a sense of space, and then there are also things you can do, like a dark piece of artwork behind glass functions as a mirror, and expands the space. You know, it's kind of counterintuitively from you think, oh, I want it bigger, I want to have white, and sometimes that's true, and sometimes it isn't. But it's hard to sort of figure out any one particular solution being generally great for everything. So it's better to be specific and not try to solve everything, but solve for what your most pressing need is.
Well, Leslie, thank you as always. This has been such a pleasure.